Hello and welcome to another Intro to Programming tutorial. In this tutorial we will going to be solving a business problem, and we're going to be writing the pseudocode for this business problem. Then we're going to be designing the form-based solution for this business problem, and then we're going to be writing the console-based solution for this business problem. The business problem is very much related to the assignment that you solved in the previous week, which is about accepting hourly rate and hours worked from user. However, this time we will going to be writing an if condition which will going to let us give different kind of pay to people who have worked more than 40 hours. So we're going to factor in the overtime pay and things of that nature. So after the business problem had been explained, here are some of the details that we have in front of us, which are English-like statements that must be converted to equivalent pseudocode statements. So it very clearly says that if user has worked less than or equal to 40 hours, then it is very simple as that gross pay will be calculated by multiplying hours worked times the hourly rate. Otherwise, if the user has worked more than 40 hours, then for the first 40 hours the formula will going to be the same as in the bullet point number 2, and for any additional hours worked other than 40, you will going to be taking the times in half, and then the sum of the two will going to calculate the overall gross pay. So now, in order to perform these operations, when we are writing pseudocode, the first thing that we got to do is we got to come up with a list of input variables. So we will going to be needing input variables in the form of hours worked and hourly rate. So that's extremely important. So let's go to the pseudocode and let's at least declare these two variables. So we're going to be declaring a couple variables which include hourly rate and hours worked. So these are two variables I need, and I'm going to be using type double for these two variables. Apart from that, I need to also store gross pay. Then I will going to be needing some form of a constant variable which includes or holds my computed value, or I will going to use some variable to hold my overtime rate. So I'm going to be declaring my overtime rate. So this is another variable I have which I'm going to be using for my overtime rate. So for now I have the following variables being used in my pseudocode. I have hourly rate, hours worked, gross pay, overtime rate, and then I also have a variable called overtime pay. So these are some of the variables I am using. So let me shorten the name over here so that I have a little bit more space. Overtime rate, overtime pay, gross pay, hours worked, hourly rate. My input from the user will going to be in the form of hourly rate and hours worked, and the rest will be calculated by the program itself. So the next thing I need to consider is take the input from user. So I have a display statement which asks user enter hourly rate, and then I take that input from user in my variable called hourly rate. Then I have another display statement which is asking user to enter hours worked, and then I'm going to be taking that input in a variable called hours worked. Okay, so I have both of my inputs done. Let's go back to the instruction set. Here it says if the user has worked for more than, as if less than or equal to 40 hours. So this is where we're going to be writing our if condition. So if hours worked is less than or equal to 40, then, so this is one form, so I'm going to write my end if right away just so that I don't forget it. It's quite possible I may have to take this logic to the next slide if we run out of space. Let me try to maximize the space I have on this slide by increasing the size of this window, of this content area. So now if hours worked is less than or equal to 40, then set gross pay equals to hours worked times hourly rate. Okay, so that easily calculates. This is very similar except for the if condition to what we did in the previous week. Now we have an else factor. So according to the instructions given to us, it says, well, otherwise. The otherwise gets actually translated in VB as an else. So we have an else block here. Now if and else, they're both part of the same end if. So we don't have to have a separate endif for else. So if the hours worked is less than or equals to 40, then gross pay is hours worked time hourly rate. Otherwise, then gross pay will going to also incorporate an overtime rate and overtime pay. Now overtime rate can be very easily calculated, which is overtime rate is you take the hourly rate and you do 1.5, which is times in half. So that's going to give you your hourly. Now, the new gross pay that we're going to be calculating will maybe a longer formula. There are two different ways of doing it. One way to do that is that the gross pay can be calculated as, you can say, I will going to take the first 40 hours and I'm going to times that by the hourly rate. And I will going to add this to another complicated formula, which is take the difference of the hours worked and 40. So let's say a person has worked for 42 hours. So for the first 40 hours is the regular hourly rate. So then hours worked minus 40, that means 42 minus 40, that means the additional 2 hours the person has worked. Then for those additional 2 hours only, the person will going to be getting the overtime rate. If I take this approach, then I don't really need this variable called overtime pay. I don't even need it. I can simply take it out because I'm not storing it in a separate variable and then utilizing it. So I could use either of the two approaches, calculate overtime pay on the side and then add it to this formula, or I could just factor everything in this one complicated formula. So I have one set of this formula, which is take the first 40 hours. If the person has worked for more than 40, you know it has worked at least the first 40. So first 40 times hourly rate, add that to the remaining hours that he has worked on top of 40 hours and times that by the overtime rate. And then the last step would be to simply display the output will be display gross pay equals to, and then you simply go about displaying whatever the gross pay of the person is. So that pretty much takes care of what we need to be doing in terms of the pseudocode logic. Now let's take this idea and let's go to the actual code. So here's my form that I'm creating in Microsoft Visual Basic, and on this form we're going to be setting up our inputs and our outputs, which will going to be very similar to what we did last time we were here in assignment number 3 when we were creating our gross pay application. So we will going to be needing form elements that will going to allow us to be able to take input from user, which will going to be the hours worked and the hourly rate. So let me quickly set this form up. So I'm going to be needing a label and a text box here. Let me set some properties for these two, and then I'm going to copy paste so that I can set up my form very quickly. So here I am increasing the font size. Okay, so first thing first, here are some properties I've set. So let me copy and paste these so that I have one box for hours worked, one box for hourly rate. I'm going to be bringing in my button that's going to do the computation for me, and then here I'm going to be displaying my final output. So this pretty much is my setup for my application. So here I'm increasing the size of the text in the button. So let me first change the text for the label and the text for the button. So let me go down to the text property. So the text for the label that I'm planning on using is hourly rate. Then the next one is hours worked. The third one is, okay, calculate gross pay. And then the last label will going to be gross pay. Now I can change the names of my text boxes. I will going to change my first text box name to txt hourly rate. My second text box is txt hours worked. And my final text box is txt gross pay. So these are the 3 text boxes that I have. Now let's go behind the scene into the logic. So let me double click on the button itself, calculate gross pay, and here let me zoom in into the code, minimize the pane so that we have the most amount of space for writing the code. Now if I go back to my pseudocode itself, the pseudocode is pretty much about accepting the input and then doing this evaluation. So let me bring in my pseudocode here. And then of course I will going to take this whole pseudocode and comment it out by using the VB's comment option. And then as you have noticed that VB sort of kind of adds some of its code when things are not in the comment, especially with input and especially with start and stop. It considered that these are VB built-in functions. So here's my pseudocode, which slowly and gradually I'm going to start converting it to my VB code. I'm going to get rid of the start and stop. We don't have any start and stop in VB. Here, let's convert this line, the very first line, into an equal in VB statement. So we got dim, hourly rate, hours worked, gross pay, overtime rate as double. Next we have the inputs. So since we're not taking an input from the user, rather our inputs are sitting in our text boxes, so we'll simply take the values from the text boxes and drop them into the respective variables. So we have hourly rate, which probably gets its value from hourly rate.text. And then for the second one, we have hours worked, which gets its input from txt hours worked.text. So that takes care of my display and input. And now comes the actual if condition. So here's my pseudocode if condition, which we're going to translate for the most part in VB pretty much as it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write here my if condition, and you can see how similar they are. If hours worked is less than equals to 40, then. And you can see very clearly that they are so much related to each other in terms of syntax. Then, of course, in pseudocode we use the words set, and set. These are the words from pseudocode. However, in VB we drop those words. So our formula we're going to stay very simple as this. That if hours worked is less than equals to 40, then this is the gross pay. Otherwise, else is the otherwise. We will going to use the exact same statements as we have over here, except for using the word set. So we have to calculate the overtime rate, and then we are doing in the next line calculation for the gross pay without the word set. Now once everything gets done, here I need to display my gross pay, which is going in another text box, which is the gross pay text box dot text, and very simple as that, gross pay. Now if I want, I can convert it to the currency format by calling the toString function. And here when I'm running my code, it pretty much asks me, okay, go about, please enter the hourly rate. So I say, okay, the hourly rate is $10, hours worked is 30, so gross pay comes out to $300. So you can see that because of the toString function and passing the C as a currency format, it automatically converts into currency format for me. Now let me make a change here from 30, let me make it 42. So here you can see it is $430. What does that mean? For the first 40 hours, it is $10 per hour. So 40 times 10 is 400. Then the times and a half of 10 is 15. And then I have 2 remaining hours from 40. So 2 times 15 is 30. 30 plus 400 gives me 430. So that pretty much takes care of my graphical user interface environment. Now let's take the exact same logic into the console-based application. So let's click File, New, Project, but this time it will going to be a console application for the assignment for Part A, which is about gross pay. So now we're going to be creating a console application. I'm going to once again be taking my pseudocode with me, and we're going to be converting the pseudocode into VB, and you can very easily see how much similarity there is between the pseudocode and the actual VB code. Of course, I'm going to be commenting this out using the VB commenting feature, and then I'll be fixing some of this, which VB automatically converts for me, thinking these are functions, as I've told you other times. Okay, so now let's consider writing equivalent statements here. Now, we already know that this converts into dim. You make a list of all your variables, and then you ask them double. So that's pretty standard. Now here, we don't have any text boxes, so we would have to write our own prompts. So for that purpose, I'm going to be writing my system.console.write enter hourly rate. And then I'm going to be doing my input into hourly rate, which will be system.console.readline. And then we can convert that into a double input, as we have learned in the past. And we're going to be taking the very same approach for the next input, which is hours worked. So we will going to be replacing the display statement enter hours worked. So that's the modification. And then the input will actually go in the variable called hours worked. Okay, so that takes care of that. Now, as far as the if condition is concerned, very similar. And this time, I'm just simply uncommenting this out. I'll just simply uncomment this. And you'll notice a lot of it will going to go as it is. As it is. No difference in the pseudocode and the VB code. It's like I just took away the comments, and that's all I needed to do. The only difference now will be to write that display statement in the VB way, which will going to be translated as system.console.writeline. I'm not using write anymore because write was used in the earlier case, but I wanted to have the console and the input in the same place. Here it will going to say the gross pay is, and then we are using the concatenation operator of gross pay. Simple as that. Okay, now let's try to test this. So we're going to be running this, and this is my console environment. Okay, so let me do Control F5 rather instead of doing F5, so that my screen stays. So first I'm taking my input, which is my first input as being asked here. Okay, so this is my first input, enter hourly rate. So let's say $10, the same one. Enter hours work, 30. It says, okay, $300. Let's try this again. Now I'm doing the same one that I did in the GUI environment, which was pretty much about enter the hourly rate of 10, but now I'm going to be enter the hours work 42, and it gave me $430 back. So here was the equivalent console-based application for this problem. Hope you would have enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions. Catch you in the next one. Have a good day.